Leora Valine stood in the warm glow of the kitchen light, carefully placing the last dish on the dining table. She had spent the entire day preparing this meal. Roast vegetables, fresh bread, and Arindis's favorite spiced stew. Everything was meant to feel like home. Tonight was supposed to be a night of peace. A night to remind her daughter that, no matter how tense things had been, this family still had love at its center. But even as she arranged the plates, her heart thudded with unease. The past few months had been rough. Ever since Arindis married Corvin Malric, there had been tension in the house. Corvin was polite in public, but dismissive when no one was watching. His words carried a quiet sharpness that left Leora questioning herself after every conversation. Still, she believed she could win him over if she tried hard enough. When Arindis and Corvin finally sat down, Leora greeted them with a small, hopeful smile. "I made your favorite, Arindis. I thought it would be nice to have a family dinner, just us." Arindis gave a stiff nod, glancing quickly at Corvin. "Thanks," she said, though her tone was flat. For a while, dinner was quiet except for the sound of spoons clinking against bowls. Leora tried to start small conversations, asking Arindis about her work, asking Corvin if he liked the food. But each attempt seemed to fall flat. Corvin didn't say much. He just sat there, watching, his expression unreadable. Then, suddenly, Arindis slammed her hand on the table so hard the glasses rattled. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Stop interfering in my life. I am not a child anymore, Mother. I don't need you telling me what to do all the time." The room fell silent. Leora felt her stomach drop. Her hand froze halfway to her mouth, spoon trembling. "Arindis," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I was just trying to help. I don't need your help." Arindis yelled again, tears glinting in her eyes but anger in every word. "You don't respect my choices. You don't respect my marriage. You think you know better than me, but you don't. You're making me miserable in my own house." Before Leora could speak, Corvin leaned back in his chair with a cruel smirk. He rested an arm over the back of the chair and said, almost casually, "She's right, you know. Your time is over in this house, Leora. We make the decisions now. You should learn to stay quiet and let us live our life." The words hit Leora like a slap. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her face burned as tears filled her eyes. This was her daughter, her own flesh and blood. And this man, this outsider, was looking her in the eye and telling her she no longer belonged. Her hands shook as she set her spoon down carefully, afraid if she moved too fast it would clatter and show how badly she was trembling. She felt everyone's eyes on her, waiting to see if she would cry, yell, or leave. But she didn't do any of those things. Instead, she sat very still, her heart thundering in her chest. "I never wanted to make you miserable," she whispered, barely audible. "I only wanted you to be happy." Arindis looked away, her jaw tight. Corvin gave a small laugh under his breath, as if he'd won something. Leora pushed her chair back and stood up slowly. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floor. She didn't trust herself to speak again. If she opened her mouth, she might scream or beg. And she would not beg. She turned toward the kitchen, blinking back tears, when she heard the sound of the front door opening. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Thurin Dravel stepped inside, carrying the faint smell of rain and late evening air with him. His face lit up when he saw Leora, until he caught the look on her face. His smile vanished instantly. "Leora?" he said slowly, his voice calm but edged with concern. His eyes shifted to Arindis and Corvin at the table. "What happened here?" Leora's throat tightened. She couldn't answer. Before she could gather herself, Corvin leaned back even farther, a smug expression on his face, and said coolly, "Nothing happened, Thurin. We were just clearing up a little misunderstanding." But Thurin's eyes narrowed as they moved from Leora's tear-streaked face to Corvin's smirk. He set his briefcase down on the side table and straightened his shoulders. "Sit down," he said, his voice suddenly deep and commanding. "All of you. Now." The air in the room shifted. Arindis swallowed hard. Corvin's smirk faltered, just slightly. Leora stood frozen by the kitchen doorway, her heart still pounding, but now there was a different feeling beneath it. Something steady, something strong. She knew this wasn't over. And as Thurin took his place at the head of the table, the entire house felt like it was holding its breath. The air in the dining room grew heavier with every passing second. The plates of food sat untouched, steam curling upward like fading ghosts. Leora remained standing near the kitchen doorway, her breath shaky, while Thurin Dravel took the empty seat at the head of the table. His eyes, sharp and steady, didn't leave Corvin Maurik for a moment. Explain, Thurin said calmly, but the weight in his voice made it sound like a command. Irindis Kalen shifted in her chair, her face pale. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, glancing nervously at her husband. Corvin leaned back lazily, crossing one leg over the other as if the entire room belonged to him. There's nothing to explain, he said coolly. Your wife interferes in our marriage. She tells Irindis what to do, how to live, what's right and wrong. Tonight, Irindis had enough. That's all. Theron's jaw tightened. He looked from Corvin to Irindis. Is that true? He asked softly. Irindis swallowed hard. Mother doesn't understand, she said, her voice trembling. She doesn't let me make my own choices. She keeps treating me like I'm still a little girl. Leora pressed a hand against her chest. Her daughter's words cut deeper than she expected. Irindis, she whispered. I only wanted to guide you, to keep you safe. Corvin gave a low chuckle. See, she can't stop. She thinks guiding means controlling. But it's time she realizes this isn't her house anymore. Things have changed. Theron's gaze darkened. He leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the table. Careful with your words, Corvin. For the first time, Corvin's smirk faltered. He wasn't used to someone standing against him so directly. He straightened in his chair, trying to mask the unease. I'm only speaking the truth. You might have run things once, Thurin, but that time is over. Irindis and I make the rules now. This is our home. Leora's breath caught. The words echoed in her chest like a cruel bell. Theron's face remained unreadable, but his silence was louder than any shout. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deliberate. You say this is your house? Yes, Corvin snapped, the smugness returning. We live here. We decide what happens here. Not you. Not Leora. That's done. Irindis nodded faintly, as though clinging to her husband's words for support, though her hands twisted nervously in her lap. Thurin sat back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Corvin's. Interesting, he said softly. Because last I checked, this roof doesn't belong to you. Or to Irindis. A cold silence settled over the table. What are you talking about? Corvin asked sharply. But Thurin didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to Leora. Sit down, he said gently. You don't need to stand anymore. Leora hesitated, her body stiff, but something in Theron's voice gave her strength. She pulled out the chair beside him and slowly sat, though her eyes stayed downcast. Corvin tapped the table impatiently. Enough of this. Don't try to play games with me, Thurin. I know what I'm saying. This house is ours now. Thurin let the words hang in the air for a moment before leaning forward. His voice was still calm, but it carried a steel edge. You're making a mistake, Corvin. And I don't think you're ready for what happens when that mistake comes to light. Irindis's eyes darted between them. What do you mean? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. Thurin didn't answer her either. He stood, walked toward the side table where he had set down his briefcase, and slowly unlatched it. The soft click of the metal echoed in the silent room. He pulled out a thin folder, its corners worn from use, and placed it firmly in the center of the dining table. The sound of it hitting the wood made Irindis flinch. What's that? Corvin asked, trying to sound confident, though his voice had tightened. Thurin slid the folder toward him. The truth, he said. Corvin scoffed, though his hand twitched before he picked it up. He opened the folder and glanced inside. His smug expression flickered, then faltered completely. The color drained from his face. What is this? He muttered, flipping through the papers. Irindis leaned closer, her eyes scanning the words on the page. When she realized what she was seeing, she gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Leora sat frozen, her chest rising and falling quickly, not yet knowing what Thurin had revealed. But the shift in Corvin's face told her everything. Something powerful had just changed. Thurin finally spoke, his voice steady and final. That folder contains the property papers for this house. And you'll notice one very important detail, Corvin. Your name isn't on them. Neither is Irindis's. The only names you'll find are mine and Leora's. The room went utterly silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause. Corvin's hands tightened around the folder. His jaw worked, but no words came out. Irindis's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her mother, then at Thurin, her voice trembling. You mean this house, it's still yours? Leora blinked in shock. She hadn't expected this. She had assumed the house was passed to her daughter after the wedding, or at least shared. But now she realized Thurin had kept everything in their names, for reasons she didn't yet understand. Corvin finally found his voice, though it was strained. That doesn't matter. Paper or no paper, this is still our life now. You can't just walk in here and... Thurin cut him off with a single look. His eyes burned with quiet fury. Be very careful with what you say next. Corvin froze. For the first time since he had married Arindis, he looked uncertain. Leora sat in stunned silence, her heart pounding. She could feel the balance of power shifting, the humiliation she had felt only moments ago beginning to lift. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end. The truth was now on the table, and nothing would ever be the same again. For a long, heavy moment, no one moved. The folder lay open in front of Corvin Malric, its papers spread out like a mirror he could not escape from. His hands gripped the edges tightly, but his confident smirk was gone. Leora Valine sat frozen beside the Rendravel, her breath shallow. She stared at the papers as if she had never seen them before. She hadn't. This was the first time she realized the truth. Her home, the house she thought she might one day hand over to her daughter, still legally belonged to her and her husband. Thurin, she whispered, her voice shaking. Why didn't you tell me? Thurin's eyes didn't leave Corvin. His voice was calm, almost too calm. Because I knew one day this moment would come. And when it did, I wanted the truth to be undeniable. Corvin slammed the folder shut with a loud snap. His face twisted with anger. So what? You think some papers change reality? We live here. We run this house. Arindis and I decide what happens here, not you. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp and defiant. You're an old man clinging to control. But times have changed. Arindis doesn't need her mother's hand holding her anymore, and she certainly doesn't need you waving papers around like they mean anything. Thurin's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice, but every word carried weight. You're wrong, Corvin. These papers mean everything. They mean this house, this table, these walls. None of them are yours. You live here because Leora and I allow it. Nothing more. The words landed like thunder. Arindis Kalin gasped softly, her eyes darting between her husband and stepfather. Corvin, is it true? The house really isn't ours. Corvin turned to her quickly, grabbing her hand. Arindis, don't listen to him. He's just trying to scare us. He's trying to make your mother feel powerful again. Don't you see? But Arindis's face was pale. Her chest rose and fell quickly. You told me this was our home, she whispered. You said we were free to make our own rules. You never mentioned the house was still theirs. Corvin's grip on her hand tightened. Because it doesn't matter. Don't let them manipulate you. You're my wife. This is our life. Leora's voice, soft but trembling, broke through. Arindis, no one is trying to manipulate you. We never wanted to take away your freedom. I only wanted you to respect me. To respect this home. Arindis looked at her mother then, and for the first time in months, she truly saw the pain in Leora's eyes. Her lips quivered, but Corvin pulled her hand back, his expression darkening. Don't fall for her guilt, Arindis. She's always wanted control. That's why she interferes in everything. That's why she cooked this meal, to make herself look like some saint. He turned sharply to Thurin. And you're just using these papers to threaten us. But you won't do anything. You're too soft. Thurin finally stood, his chair scraping against the floor. His tall frame seemed to fill the entire room. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but there was fire in it. You have made a grave mistake, Corvin. You thought disrespect would go unchallenged. You thought humiliating my wife would make you stronger. But here, in this house, respect is not optional. Corvin stood too, facing him directly. The two men locked eyes, the tension so sharp it could cut glass. Arindis stood as well, her hands trembling. Please stop this, she begged. Her voice cracked. Corvin, enough. You've said too much. But Corvin ignored her. His pride burned too brightly. And what if I don't stop, Thurin? What will you do then? Throw us out. Throw your own daughter into the street. Thurin took a slow step forward. If that's what it takes to protect my wife's dignity, then yes. I will. The words shook the entire room. Leora's eyes widened in shock. Arindis burst into tears. No, please, she cried, clutching her head. Don't do this. Don't tear us apart. For the first time, Corvin faltered. His bravado cracked as he saw the desperation in his wife's eyes. His shoulders sagged just slightly. Thurin stopped in front of him, standing tall, his voice low but unyielding. You think strength is measured by control and cruelty. But true strength is measured by how you protect the people you claim to love. And tonight, Corvin, you showed everyone here that you love only yourself. The silence after those words was deafening. Corvin looked down, his fists clenched, but he said nothing. Arindis sobbed quietly, torn between the husband she had chosen and the parents who had raised her. Leora reached out to touch her daughter's hand, but Arindis pulled away, lost in her own storm of shame and confusion. Thurin finally stepped back and returned to his seat, leaving Corvin standing in stunned silence. "Sit down," Thurin said firmly. "This conversation isn't finished, but you will sit down and remember whose roof you're under." Corvin hesitated, his pride bleeding, but slowly, reluctantly, he lowered himself back into his chair. Leora sat stiffly, her heart pounding, but a spark of strength flickered in her chest. For the first time in months, she felt the weight of humiliation lifting. The truth was out now, lying in plain sight on the table for all to see. But even as she sat there, she knew this night was far from over. The pain between mother and daughter was too deep, the pride of Corvin Maurik too stubborn. This confrontation had revealed the truth, yes. But the question now was, what would they do with it? The dining room was silent, but the silence was not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that pressed on everyone's chest, making it hard to breathe. The folder with the house papers still lay on the table, its edges sticking out like a sharp blade. Leora Valine sat stiffly beside the Indravel, her hands folded in her lap, trying to stop them from shaking. Her daughter, Irindis Kalin, stood near her chair, her face pale, her eyes wet. Corvin Maurik sat opposite them, his jaw clenched, his pride battling with the reality of what had just been revealed. Finally, Irindis spoke. Her voice was trembling, almost childlike. "Mother," she whispered, I didn't know. I thought," she covered her face with her hands. "I thought this was ours. I thought we were in control. I thought I was finally free." Her words broke something inside Leora. She reached out slowly and touched her daughter's wrist. "Irindis, you've always been free," she said softly. "You don't need to scream at me to prove it. I never wanted to chain you. I only wanted you safe." Irindis's shoulders shook as tears streamed down her cheeks. For the first time since the fight began, she let her mother's hand stay on her arm. Corvin scoffed, breaking the fragile moment. "Don't let her fool you, Irindis. This is exactly what she wants, to make you feel guilty, to make you crawl back to her. Can't you see? This is control." Theron's voice cut through the air like thunder. "Enough!" Corvin turned to him, anger flashing. "You don't get to silence me." Theron's eyes narrowed. "I don't need to silence you, Corvin. You do it yourself every time you open your mouth. You've humiliated my wife, poisoned my daughter's heart, and now you think you can stand in this house and lecture us on control? Not anymore." Corvin shot to his feet. "What are you going to do, old man? Throw me out? Throw her out too? You think Irindis will choose you over me?" His voice rose, sharp and cruel. "She's my wife. She belongs with me. You can't take her away." Irindis flinched at the words, her tears turning to quiet sobs. "Corvin, stop." But Thurin rose as well, towering over him, his voice low and steady. "No one belongs to you, Corvin. Not Irindis. Not Leora. You don't own people. You respect them, or you lose them." The words hung heavy in the air. Leora felt her heart pound as if the truth itself had filled the room. Corvin's face twisted in fury. "Respect? She doesn't deserve respect." He pointed at Leora, his voice dripping with venom. "She's the reason Irindis doubts herself. She's the reason we fight. She needs to stay out of our life." That was the moment Irindis broke. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice shaking the walls. "Just stop." She turned to Corvin, tears streaming. "Don't you dare blame her. She raised me when no one else would. She gave me everything. And what have you given me, Corvin? Doubt. Anger. A house full of fights." Corvin's eyes widened. "Irindis." But she shook her head violently. "No. Don't say my name. I defended you tonight against my own mother, and you humiliated me. You lied to me. You never told me the truth about this house. You made me believe we had power here, when we never did. And worse, you made me hurt the woman who loves me more than anyone else in this world." Her voice cracked. "I'm done, Corvin. I can't keep living like this." Corvin stepped toward her, his hand outstretched, his voice suddenly soft. "Irindis, please. I only wanted us to stand on our own. I didn't want them controlling us." But Irindis stepped back. "No, Corvin. You didn't want us to stand. You wanted to stand above everyone else. That's not strength. That's selfishness." Leora's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different, tears of both sorrow and pride. For the first time, her daughter was seeing clearly. Corvin's face hardened again. He looked at Thurin, then at Leora, his pride bleeding out of him. "This isn't over," he muttered. He shoved the chair aside and stormed out of the dining room, the the sound of the door slamming echoing through the house. The silence that followed was crushing. Irindis collapsed into the chair beside her mother, her head falling into her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered through her sobs. "I'm so sorry, Mother. I let him turn me against you. I said things I can never take back." Leora wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her tightly. "You're my child," she said softly. "There's nothing you can say that will ever make me stop loving you. I forgive you. But promise me something, Irindis. Promise me you'll never let anyone speak to me that way again. Not even you." Irindis nodded against her shoulder, her sobs slowing. "I promise." Thuren placed a strong hand on Leora's back, his voice steady. "This house will always be yours, Leora. No one, no man, no words can take that from you. Tonight proved it." Leora looked up at him, her eyes glistening, and for the first time that night, she felt her dignity return. The table was still filled with untouched food. The stew had gone cold, the bread had hardened. But Leora no longer cared. The dinner that had started in humiliation had ended with truth. She had walked into the night believing she had lost her daughter forever. But now, holding Irindis in her arms, she realized something powerful. Respect wasn't given, it was demanded. And tonight, it had finally been restored.